We unite to foster liberal attitudes in religion and in living, and to further individual freedom of belief, the democratic process in human relations in the community, the nation, and the world, to recognize the basic dignity of man, and through the strength of unity to give such expression to these convictions as the fellowship decides.
One day my young son was watching his father on a ladder, and he said, "How does God get down from heaven without a ladder?" And my husband and I looked at each other and realized there were going to be theological questions we couldn't answer. And we talked that evening with our friends the Hardgroves and the Aldriches, with whom we often had dinner, and found that their 4 children in each household were coming to the same point, and we decided that we were probably sometime going to need a church.
When our oldest daughter got to be about 6, she was having good friendship with one of the neighbor girls about her age, and they became closer and closer friends until finally one day the little girl up the street asked our daughter if she would like to come to Sunday school with her in the Catholic Church. That didn't set too well with us, so we decided it was time that we got busy and found a Sunday school for our own children not in the Catholic Church. We went to the Methodist Church locally and found that they talked a very good game, but they still had hellfire and damnation coming out their ears. So eventually we did find the Unitarian Church in Palo Alto, where we took our kids for several years. We came to like it very much. Our kids didn't like it that much, so that's part of how come we started our own church.
I remember meeting at Ann Benner's house, and I remember that we asked people who were members of other congregations, Unitarian congregations, to come talk with us.
Between 1950 and 1952, we did have a series of meetings with Unitarian ministers from the Bay Area who came and spoke with us, and we decided that this was really what we wanted to do. And so we had a public meeting at Marion Hemingway's house, just a couple of blocks from where we are now. And there were about 35 people there. A few of them were lifelong Unitarians, some were newer people. And we met at Marion's and drove a statement of purpose, which was authored mostly by Ren Hemingway and Lou Jones, and that remains our statement of purpose today, and then applied to the American Unitarian Association for membership, which came to us in 1952 at the May meetings in Boston. And since 1952, we've been a going concern, and will this year be 40 years old. Marion Hemingway's name comes up very often in talking about this church because it was the center of her life, and she was the center of the church's life. She died last year, unfortunately. She was not a birthright Unitarian, but she was a very strong one when she came to our community. And our forming meeting was in her living room, and for many years we had lots of other important meetings at her house, including the Great Decisions courses annually. She was the first woman elected to the City Council of San Mateo. She never became mayor, but she was a strong force in the political life of San Mateo. She was a great supporter of the United Nations and of UNICEF and of the League of Women Voters, and made a great impact in our community, and I think was a spokesperson and people associated our church with her, and we became stronger and better known in the community because we had such a wonderful spokesperson.
The group began by meeting apparently in each other's homes, and eventually acquired an old residence building which they remodeled, located at 522 North San Mateo Drive, and met there for a while. And just, I think, about the time that they grew too large for that and had begun to move into the quarters next door, which was then the Les Williams Dance Studio. It was about the time Jean Ann and I joined the church.
Well, I think it was kind of exciting in the early days. I think, you know, this shouldn't be passed by lightly because, you know, from year to year we'd be moving in different spots, and there's a certain spontaneity and refreshing atmosphere to it. But I enjoyed especially the dance studio, because behind our religious leader was a whole block of windows, and you not only could admire yourself in the window, but you could keep an eye on your fellow worshipers to make sure they didn't go to sleep or something. And also it had a great advantage in it magnifying, of course, multiplying the number of people that were there. You know, it made it look as though really you had a very generous attendance.
Paul, what you described as windows were really mirrors.
Yes, they were.
Floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and it was a little disturbing to sit there and see yourself as you were listening to a sermon.
After a few years there, and I cannot recall the date, we became too large for the dance studio, and we started holding services at the YMCA over in El Camino, while we were still using 522 in the dance studio for Sunday school space. The YMCA was particularly interesting because we couldn't leave anything there, and they wouldn't give us a key. Because we couldn't leave anything there, for quite a long time, I don't even like to think about how long, I carried the church's speakers and record player in the back of my car and would set them up every Sunday morning and then take them down and put them back in the car afterwards. And there were mornings that the person from the YMCA with the key didn't show up, and we had to stand around in the cold and wait. One Easter morning, as I recall, in particular Easter Sunday, when the kids were quite cold in their Easter clothes. There was another occasion when we couldn't get in, and the eldest son of a couple of our members climbed up on the roof and managed to fall through a skylight and hurt himself. In fact, I think he broke a bone. Yeah. Eventually, we got not only too large but too tired for that, and discovered that this particular used Methodist church was no longer holding services, and began to rent the use of its sanctuary, and eventually purchased it from the Methodists, and this is where we still are.
I was involved in the quest for this present building, and we had a lot of amusing things happen. We considered, among other places, a school that was falling down in Belmont, and we also a Jewish synagogue, and also, believe it or not, a mortuary. And these were all considered and kicked around, and we had delegations, and they all decided, was this a weight-bearing wall, and real exciting things like that. But ultimately, we were able to purchase this church, and the actual date was 1971, because 71 was one of the years I was president, and I spent the whole year buying the church, which incidentally, I did buy it without any cost to the church itself, and was a labor of love, and I was happy to be able to do it. So this then, incidentally, we did do a little bargaining. They were asking $125,000, but I didn't act so much as a parishioner. I acted more like a real estate broker, which I was in Ann, so we got it for $115,000. And that was my triumph, and I enjoyed it.
Several of us have emphasized the tolerance in this church. And I think one of the symbols of that tolerance is right over our heads here. On one of the walls is a Jesus window. And over the years, ever since we've had this church, the raging argument has been, should we take the Jesus window out? Should we leave it in? And I'm not sure if it's a matter of tolerance or inertia, but after all these years, the Jesus window still stands there.
What attracted us was a place where we could find some ideas that did not conflict with either one of our own. We come from different religious backgrounds, and we were looking for a compromise. And this was our compromise. We stayed because we found a wonderful community, and we have friends, our kids have friends, and Dana likes the school, she was telling me this morning.
basically I've known about Unitarian Universalism for quite a while. The thing that I like about the church is several things. First of all, we don't have a set creed or dogma that people are required to follow. So people can come here with their own belief system, and the church exists to support that belief system. I also like the fact that the church is very active in the community. There's a real sense of community here. So it's a very, very warm place to be.
I think the liberal attitude, belief system that we have here, that there's good in many philosophies and many religions, and that there isn't one true answer for each individual.
The people in this church are very special people. It's one reason that I belong to this group. We do not all agree on everything. We may have a philosophy, but it's fairly loose. And one of the things that all of us are rather intolerant is toward intolerance. I think if people can understand this, that they can understand us a little better and what holds us together. This is one of the things.
I'm very proud of the connections I have with the many people in this church. Granted, I've only been a member of the church for about half of this period of time, for about 20 years, and though it doesn't seem like 20 years. And every person I have ever met has just increased my life and has made it just a very not a second home.
I think the main thing I would like to say, and I'm not saying this just because I'm chairman of the membership committee, I think perhaps I'm chairman of the membership committee because I would say this, is like anything else in life, what you get is what you give. And to come to church every Sunday or every few Sundays, and that's the extent of your commitment, you're not going to get really that much from the experience. But if you participate in the church community, working beside people is the way you get to know people on a deeper level, in a way that we learn to sustain each other's growth. And I think that that's what this congregation is all about. And I think that's what I would say is probably the heart of things here, is getting in there and doing the dog work, working in the kitchen sometimes, working on things that require quite a bit of effort, and just being enriched by the experience.
Our first minister was the Reverend Russell Lincoln, who came out of the Methodist Church, and I think he probably had a very difficult time because we were used to running things ourselves, and we didn't want him to edit the newsletter or do anything else. Our second minister was the Reverend Robert Botley, and he also came out of the Methodist Church, and this was his first Unitarian church, but we dearly loved him. Our third minister was the Reverend Bernie Kruger, and Bob Fraser, and he was with us for a number of years, and his family were very important to our church. Then our next minister was the Reverend Bernie Kruger, and then the Reverend Daniel Panger, and now our present minister that we hope will be with us into eternity, Joy Atkinson.
I think Joy is truly the heart of this church. I'm sure she would probably say that the congregation is the heart of the church, but in fact, she leads by example. She is very interested in each and every member of the congregation. She's a very genuine person who just communicates well. I mean, people look forward to her sermons. They look forward to communicating with her. She's just a very vital, genuine person that I think represents this congregation well and represents the denomination extremely well.
I just want to say what a joy it is, no pun intended, but what a joy it is to serve a congregation as exciting and as self-sufficient as this congregation is. Personally, it's very fulfilling to be the minister of a Unitarian Universalist congregation, and I have served other congregations. But this church in particular, I find a lot of personal support as well as support for my leadership as a minister. Just as an example, a couple of years ago, I guess it's 3 years ago now, my father died. And I received such an outpouring of support from this congregation. Something that you don't find in most places. Just a real caring, lots of notes, cards, lots of checking in with me to see how I was doing. And it really made me very aware of how mutual the ministry is in this church. And it's very fulfilling and very satisfying.
One of the great motivations, certainly in our family, was that our children should learn some things in Sunday school that they would never have to unlearn when they became an adult.
In my opinion, it's absolutely essential that the young people come into our church to add vitality to the overall picture. And without having our RE program, we wouldn't be attracting these young parents. It's also important from the standpoint that the parents have an opportunity to pass their values on to their children.
We're on a 3-year cycle with our church's curriculum, and it works so that each year we have a different focus. This year we're focusing on the Bible, and the children are learning about various Bible stories that and how they apply to their lives, not from the point of view of them being the Word of God so much as the educational message that they can get from the individual stories. We also do a year on Unitarian Universalism, and we often talk that year about various important Unitarian Universalists and the contributions that they've made. The third part of the series is on world religions, and we study various world religions, both other Western religions and Eastern. The older children will often during that year make trips to various different churches in our Church Across the Street program, and that's a real valuable experience for them.
We have 3 parts of our religious program here at the church for our children that we really emphasize. One of them is we emphasize the diversity of ideas, of environment, of people, and the feeling that diversity is something that really makes us stronger, that they have not only a respect for diversity, a tolerance for diversity, but actually that they honor diversity, that they realize that this world is so much stronger because of diversity. We also want them to find a community here. We want them to find lifetime friends, people that they'll know all their lives, and people that they will feel comfortable with and make connections with that can strengthen them when they need strengthening. And the third thing is just to have an awareness that people have always asked important religious questions. They've asked questions like, who am I? Where do I belong? What's right and what's wrong? What happens when I die? These are things that we want our children to think about, to know that lots of people have thought about through the ages and have come up with many different answers to. The kids really respond well to the questions that are asked of them. They love thinking about things. They love doing things. We want them to be active. We want the religious process here to be one that really engages them and one that they're active in. We're not just sitting them in their seats and giving them a lesson that they're supposed to learn that has only one specific answer. We want them to think for themselves. We want them to realize that there are a lot of different answers. We want them to interact with each other. And that's something that they do in many different ways. I feel that by making a commitment to religious education, this church has really given its children and its adults too a gift. Because religious questions should be exciting ones. They should be part of our lives as religious people, that we're thinking constantly about whether the lives we're living are good, are valuable, whether they're making an impact. And I think that religious education, in a nutshell, is really a hope for the future.